All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and yeah, got a little bit of a difficulty there getting this program going. Had the audio off for my microphone. Yeah, so but I thought I'd just, rather than reset everything, just go ahead and restart the stream. So you should be able to see me now. I can see we're going out there. I hope it looks good on the Facebook sort of super, connected stream. I've got a connected stream on Facebook as well. If I have to edit this thing after the fact, I'll do it. I'd rather not have to do that, of course. 240-242-5646. Help me out here, since I struggled, obviously, to get the program going. And it's too bad, because I actually think this is a good show. I think it'll be a good discussion. We will just get into Kamala Harris's reparations plan. She doesn't call it reparations. In fact, she says it's just to help, lift all the boats that are riding a little bit lower in the ocean. But she has in the past, and there's my little countdown timer too going. So she has in the past, though, said that the $25,000 homeowners subsidy for those who are buying for the first time would really help poorer families, and specifically targeting African American families. She's had some other proposals as well to try to reduce the wealth gap between blacks and whites. So we'll talk about that, whether that's the right solution. Brianna Joy Gray and her guest from yesterday don't think it is. He's a Duke professor, and we'll get into that. And in fact, whether reparations even is the ideal. I'd love to talk to you, though. 240-242-5646. Also made a few changes. That's why we had the tech issue, right? Because I made some changes yesterday and I forgot, or neglected to, whatever term you want to use, to get my microphone hot again. That's what caused the problem. But what I do on this program is I center those who are really in the worst possible places, especially due to American empire, American hegemony around the globe, as well as the corporate state. Right now, the victims in the world who are most prominent, in my opinion, are the Palestinian people. Israel has opened up its genocidal front against the Palestinians beyond simply Gaza, to include the West Bank. And the news is terrible. We see here that just in the past 24 hours, and this is Monday, basically Monday in the Middle East. So I'm trying to figure out what the 24 hours is. I believe it's Monday in Gaza. So yesterday was a bad day. 32 people. There have been many worse days. Tomorrow, or today, I guess, will be probably worse, because it started out so awfully, and we'll get into that in a moment. But September 10 news for September 9th, Monday in Gaza. 32 people killed by Israel, 100 wounded. The death toll now at 41,020. I won't spend a lot of time talking about yesterday's action by Israel, except, again, suffice it to say, incredibly bloody, murderous action by the Israeli government. I note, which I've been doing here, just to keep the point very, very clear, the Biden-Harris administration has blood on its hands, a lot of Palestinian blood. Over 41,000 Gazans now killed by Israel since October 7th, with 32 reported dead yesterday, and the number presumably could be much higher. We know that the numbers reported from Gaza by the health ministry there often are an undercount, which they readily acknowledge. They can't capture every killing by the Israeli military. And I will not call them the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. They are not a defense force. They are an aggressive force, a force that is now a tool of genocide. And if you think that term is too strong, let's go to this report from Gaza, from Deutsche Welle. That's German World News. Here it is. This is from today, from this morning. As I mentioned, the reports are just awful. So let's see if we can get today's latest, and I don't see it there. Or why does it say RFK Kamala? So of course something went wrong again. I'll get that up for you in just a second in a different way. But the news from the German media was dozens. ABC reporting on the IDF says it was 19. Either way, awful. This was on a camp that was designated by Israel to be a safe zone, a place where Palestinians would be safer than in their homes, which have been mostly eradicated, mostly destroyed. So obviously that's just simply false. It's simply not in any way accurate, as Israel has now decided to start bombing or to continue bombing. We know they keep doing this, to continue bombing refugee camps anywhere where Palestinians, Gazans may be. So here's the report from Deutsche Welle, and I'll just give you that headline as well. Dozens killed in Israeli strike. Here we go.
Let's talk about this with our Jerusalem correspondent, Tanya Kramer. What more can you tell us, first of all, about the latest attacks?
Well, we know that this strike happened on early Tuesday morning when people there in the tents were resting and sleeping. This happened in a designated humanitarian area that's defined by the Israeli military. These are mainly tens of thousands of Palestinians that have been forcibly displaced from their homes, but some of them have been, or most of them have been multiple times been displaced, and they have been looking for shelter and safety in these areas. Now, eyewitnesses and rescue services have said they've heard several impacts, and from the images that are coming through, there are several craters appear to be seen there in the area, and we could see people there digging in with their bare hands, trying to find or to rescue loved ones and people there. It's a sandy area, so it's a very difficult terrain to get to people now. Rescue services have said that their entire families are still missing. Of course, information is still coming in, and also the numbers could change. But we also heard now in a new statement by the Israeli military that they are disputing those numbers given by the health services in Gaza, which are run by Hamas. They're saying they do not align with the information held by the IDF, given the precise munitions used and the accuracy of the strike. That is according to their statement.
Okay, you're talking about craters having been seen at the same time, precision weapons, the justification from Israel being that it's targeting Hamas. The pictures, again, that we're seeing of civilian deaths.
All right, so let me stop it there so you can see the skepticism in that reporter's voice with respect to the Israeli military statement that we were using precision weaponry. And he's saying, hey, look at these giant craters. What's precise about that? And obviously that's that's right. This is who we support. This is our tight ally. This is who Biden Harris have pledged to provide unwavering military aid to. The weapons that are eradicating Gaza, and now we're also seeing being used to kill Palestinians. This is genocide, and I will not support it. I urge you not to. I'm going to get into why I think this program, despite the technical problems, I know I'm juggling a lot of balls and I make mistakes. I do apologize for those for sure. But you're getting an unfiltered viewpoint. You're not getting any Democratic Party spin, period, on Halitics. And you do get that. Man, it's so sad from so many other podcasters, live streamers, even the ones who are independent. I question sometimes, their analyses very seriously. And we'll get into that with Brianna Joy Gray, one of my favorites, and a little bit later in the program. But I do want to just spotlight Crystal Ball and Breaking Points and their reaction to this story, which I highlighted yesterday. This is a Turkish-American or an American-Turkish woman, young woman, just graduated from college in the United States, and she was shot in the head shot in the head over the weekend or Friday by the Israeli military. She was protesting the illegal settlements in the West Bank. And there you can see her, Eisener Eigel, her family photo just earlier this year, this summer. So they covered this. Yet I guess it was today, maybe it was yesterday on Breaking Points after I did. And there was a lot of good stuff that Crystal Ball got into. So I'm going to play this for you. But again, I want you to see the difference between the way Halitics ultimately approaches the story and the way Breaking Points does. And maybe you can decide, maybe you like Breaking Points' view better. Obviously, I don't because I'm doing Halitics, but you might feel differently. I'd like your thoughts, 240-242-5646. And again, don't forget, click subscribe, click like, help me build this channel. All right, here's Breaking Points on the targeted killing by the Israeli military of an American activist who was exercising free speech rights in an area where those rights are clearly, completely disrespected by Israel.
Once again, we have some horrific news coming out of the Middle East. We can put this up on the screen. An American citizen now fatally shot, murdered by the IDF in the West Bank at a protest. Reading from this AP article, Israeli soldiers killed an American woman demonstrating against settlements in the West Bank on Friday, according to a witness who said she was shot while posing no threat to Israeli forces and during a moment of calm after clashes earlier in the afternoon. Two Palestinian doctors said 26-year-old Eisenor Ezgi Egi of Seattle was shot in the head. The U.S. government confirmed her death, did not say whether the recent graduate of the University of Washington, who was also a Turkish citizen, had been shot by Israeli troops, so they have not accepted the many eyewitness accounts of what actually unfolded. The White House said it was, quote, deeply disturbed by the killing of a U.S. citizen and called on Israel to investigate what happened. Yeah, I'm sure we all should have a lot of confidence in what's going to come out of that investigation.
All right, so let me just stop. Yeah, just jump in there. So 100% on her coverage. We should not have any confidence in the Israeli report. And apparently, and Israel has come out with a report since this was broadcast. Their statement is that it was a mistake, that they it was a tragic accident and they meant to shoot somebody else, but by mistake hit her. And a lot of the protesters, the ralliers who were watched in horror as she was shot, as this woman was murdered, by a sniper many yards away. It wasn't like they were shooting into the crowd or it was a raucous crowd. Somebody just took aim at her and cold-bloodedly, an Israeli soldier took cold-blood, maybe a police officer, I don't know, took cold-blooded aim at her and killed her. The defense that Israel put up is also, well, we felt endangered by this crowd. They were throwing rocks at us. They were throwing rocks at the soldiers. Well, first of all, if you don't want rocks thrown at you, get your damn army out of another country where you don't belong and you don't have a right. Get the hell out. That's my first reaction. My second thought or reaction is, what did the witnesses say? They said, no. There was rock throwing, yes, but it was in a very different place. It wasn't anywhere near where we were, and the rock throwing had already ended. But there's no way they could have possibly thought this peaceful protester could have been any danger to them, and yet they shot her in the head. Good luck hearing anything more about this from the Biden-Harris administration. There's going to be, they just said, oh, there's a tragic accident. We're sorry about it. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to do anything about this. I give Crystal Ball all the credit in the world for centering this story, for platforming Eigel, for saying her name a lot better than I ever could. I want to play a little more because, again, this is the difference between Breaking Points, between other podcast progressives like Crystal Ball and myself. I'm going to say you can't vote for Kamala Harris. You can't reward this administration for its support of genocide. You just can't do it. There has to be a red line. There has to be a bridge too far. And supporting genocide is indeed that bridge too far. Where does Crystal Ball go with this? Let's find out.
the United States of America has the ability to do that. Look at Israeli military analysts who say Israel will be nowhere in this war without the massive, multiple, repeated shipments of weapons that we have provided.
All right, so I'll stop her there for a second. So well, first of all, she uses the term war, which it is, and it's a slaughter. It's not a war. It's a war on a group of people. It's not a war. Like there's a book, Lucy Davidovitz, classic, about the Holocaust, the war against the Jews. This is a war by Israel against Palestinians. It's really, that's all it is. It's not a war between two armies. Crystal Ball says, hey, this wouldn't be happening if we weren't providing the weapons to Israel. She just, I haven't heard of this quote, but I'm sure she's got it somewhere. Military analysts, Israeli analysts saying without American weaponry, Israel couldn't be killing all these Palestinians. And of course that makes 100% sense because we know the bombs are American made. We've heard report after report. Yes, the bomb that killed 95 people was American made. When they dropped they blew up this residential building, it was with an American bomb. Boeing made the bomb. So, of course, we are complicit. I mean, I don't know how. We're guilty of war crimes. If you give a gun to a bank robber in advance of a bank robbery and the robber, your friend comes to you, your buddy says, hey, I want to rob the First National Bank. Yeah, give me that piece that, that you've been bragging about. So you say, okay, here it is. Knock yourself out. And your buddy goes and kills somebody, kills the guard. Guess what? You're on trial for felony murder right there. You're on trial. You're guilty. You're just as guilty as the guy who pulled the trigger. So, I mean, that's what we're responsible for just as much as Israel at this point for this genocide. Biden Harris, I won't be party to that. I don't know how you can be. I know everyone, I keep hearing the argument, oh, Hal doesn't get it. He doesn't realize how Trump is worse. I'm not going to get into this, who's worse. We're giving weapons to the genocider. We're giving weapons to the maniacal, murderous state. Period. End of story. I won't support Biden Harris because they're the ones doing that. I won't do it. I don't know how you can. And if you don't vote against them, then you're complicit too. Then you're part of the problem. All right, more from Crystal Ball.
This slaughter to continue. So it's not hard to figure out. Just stop shipping the bombs. But that apparently is just too out there, too far off the table. They would rather risk, the lives of American citizens. They would rather risk certainly the lives of every.
So when she says they, she means Biden Harris, right? She means Biden Harris because she just said, hey, stop shipping the weapons. Well, who's shipping them? Biden Harris. She's saying, hey, but they'd rather risk American lives. And then she's going to go on to say,
now the West Bank as well. They would rather risk Kamala Harris getting elected president of the United States or Donald Trump getting back at the White House than actually.
So she's not saying, she's lamenting this. Oh my gosh, because of what we're doing, we might get Trump. Because of what Harris Biden is doing, we might get Trump. What she doesn't say is, we can't have either one. We've got to move in a different direction. Vote for Jill Stein. I looked through the entire, the transcript of this program. No mention of Stein. No suggestion you vote in another way. All Crystal Ball is saying it is, hey, I really like you guys, Kamala, but you're risking your election. Not you should stop because this is a war crime, and because of what you're doing, you shouldn't be president. But she won't say that. That's why this show is different. That's why this show is better than what you get from most corporatized, mainstream, even so-called progressive podcasters. Let me play someone who gets it. This is the right response. And I backed Cornel West. I thought he should have been your choice when he announced he was running as a Green, and then he pulled the rug out from me and from a lot of other people. So I'm not supporting Cornel West, but I sure as hell endorse this statement.
I don't think it was that high up, because believe me, brother.
All right, so he's talking about how he was asked here in this clip whether he supports, whether he was offered a position in the Harris administration if he withdraws from the race. The theory being that he might, just a few votes could be the difference, and clearly that's what this is shaping up to be, dead heat. So is, Harris so desirous of getting rid of, of winning, that she and getting West out of the race, that she would offer him a high position in her administration? Almost certainly she would not. It was a dumb question by what's his name, Sheridan, but it leads directly into his profound analysis.
The highest position in the empire that can't say a word about genocide, for me, it's just a place in Dante's Inferno, man. And that's the lowest litmus test of morality, to oppose genocide. And when you deny genocide, when you actually enable genocide, that cannot be the only option to fascism.
Right. All right, so that's where we are. Clearly, he's right. He's saying, I don't care what they offer me. And I doubt they offered him anything. But I don't care what they offer me. Being part of a genocide, being part of an administration that aids genocide, is complicit in genocide, that denies genocide, all what the Harris-Biden administration is doing, I can't. That's being in hell. That's being part of an inferno. And that's right. You vote for that, that's what you're voting for. It's really that simple. There's no question. The morality is so clear here. Life isn't always so clear cut. Sometimes there are tough choices we have to make. Sometimes it's not obvious what's the right decision. But here it is obvious. You can't vote for somebody who said, I will support Israel unwaveringly, or you lose your soul in doing that. I was so disappointed when I saw this. By the way, don't forget, click like, click subscribe. Did I put my subscribe now? But I don't know. I'll put that up there in a moment. I'll give you the little button there. Click, but it's always the bottom right of your screen. So I was so disappointed when I saw this. Kristen Mink is a Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live, supervisor and or county council member. I guess they are called supervisors, yeah. And she is leading a canvass into the swing state, the purple state of Pennsylvania, in support of Kamala Harris. And Kristen Mink ran as an unabashed progressive. She has been very critical of the Democratic establishment. I haven't always agreed with her. She and I clash a little bit on trans issues because I, as you know, don't believe it's appropriate for trans females to compete against biological females. I'm sorry if you'd rather I use the term cis. I'm not going to use the term cis because I don't think that fully captures the distinction here. The distinction is between those who are conceived female and those who are conceived male. And I know there's a tiny number in the middle, the XXYs and XY. I don't know if there's an XYY, but there's an XXY. And I know there's a few DSDs, they're people with developmental sex differences. So we'll leave those out of it. But in general, those are the super hard cases. But my view has been clear. If you're conceived XY, you should not be competing against females in high level or even medium level sports competitions. And this is a different view than Kristen Mink has. And okay, we're allowed to have different views. But in general, I've always found her to be, and she's, what some would say to the left of me on that, I suppose. But she's a great person. And yet here she's going out there to Pennsylvania to campaign for this genocidal, ecocidal. I throw ecocide in there because remember, she's come out. Oh, I'm against any fracking bans. I'm for fracking. So she's a genocidal, ecocidal monster. Is Kamala Harris? You can't. So I was very disappointed. I wrote this to Kristen, and she and I know each other. She invited me to her. I'm sure she regrets it. She invited me to her victory luncheon. She had a victory luncheon where she brought together fellow progressives, which I thought was really, really nice. I really appreciated being there. There were some union leaders there. It was really nice of her to do it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to send her an email just to let her know how I feel about all this. And I wrote, I thank you for inviting me to campus. Now, of course, it was a generalized invitation. It wasn't like a special, but still, okay, I'm on your list. And I supported your campaign. I want to give you something nice, throw you a bone here. Pleased with your strong backing of teachers and students, which she has done. So that's a real positive. But moving on to the canvas, I am disappointed that you appear to be putting loyalty to party, right? She's still a Democrat. That's why we need Greens. You can't. This is why the Democrat Party has to be an afterthought when you're considering for whom to vote. We've got to move away from this duopoly. Harris has made it clear she supports, in her word, unwaveringly, which is her word, the state of Israel. She will not, if elected, put any conditions on a never-ending supply of bombshells and bullets to the Israeli military. This is despite the fact that they're being used to eradicate the Palestinian people. So how can you, in good faith, support Kamala Harris? I don't believe you can. And I made I didn't give you everything here, but in my letter, I said, hey, my email, I said, hey, there's a better alternative. And, you can make the argument, well, but Trump. But even with Trump isn't worse than Harris on every issue. He is not worse when it comes to Ukraine. And if you say, well, he's a fascist, okay, I actually have a little more faith in our democracy to the extent we still have one, which we really don't. But I have a little more faith that Trump is not going to be able to impose a dictatorship. I just don't see that happening. Maybe it would, but right now we're confronting ecocide and genocide, and the Democrat Party is complicit in both, and I'm not going to vote for the story. There is an alternative. It is the Green Party. It is Jill Stein. Kristen Mink, you are a leader. You're an elected. Lead us to a better place. Lead us away from the corporate duopoly. Lead us away from Killer Kamala. That's all I can ask. That's all I can hope for. 240-242-5646 would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. Okay, I guess I billboarded this program. I advertised it as one that's going to focus a little bit or a lot of bit on Kamala Harris's housing plan. And I mentioned this, I've discussed this a little bit before. I'm not a huge fan of the $25,000 subsidy for first-time homebuyers. I don't think it's a terrible idea. They addressed this on another one of my, I would say not another one of my favorite hosts, because Crystal Ball is not one of my favorite hosts, but Brianna Joy Gray is, and she has on a Duke professor, and they're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to play a clip from this Bad Faith podcast of Kamala Harris and how she, at least in this campaign, is not running as somebody who is going to provide specific help or black only, let's put that with you, who's not touting black only or black targeted solutions. They don't like that. Here's the clip.
And I think that there's this widely circulated video of Kamala Harris saying something to the effect of, well, I'm not going to be seen doing something just for Black people. And so there's absolutely no reason to anticipate that just because somebody is Black, they will be activists on behalf of the Black community, even if they
All
are.
right, so I'll stop it there for a second. We'll get to more. We'll actually play the clip with Kamala in just a moment. But his point is, hey, this is really bad. She's Black, or she's, mixed race, and yet she's saying, I'm not promoting Black-only solutions. Well, I don't get why that's a problem for him. I truly don't. I understand he's African American. But if her solutions will uplift poor, struggling, working class, and middle class Americans, shouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't that be what you want? But it is not. As a matter of fact, what the professor, and I want to get his name for you, so I'm going to get it for you right now. What that professor wants is he wants to eliminate. His name is William Darity, Duke Professor of Public Policy, Economics, and African American Studies. So obviously very highly accomplished academic. But his view, which is not mine, is that there need to be Black targeted solutions. And his view is that what Harris proposes doesn't meet that standard. It won't help eliminate close, I think is the term he uses, the wealth gap. It's not enough, I guess, to narrow it. You have to actually close it completely. So here's more from Professor Darity.
In major positions of authority. So the question for me is not, how somebody looks. The question for me is, what's the substance of the program that they want to pursue?
But I want to stop it there. That's the same question for me. I don't care what a person looks like. I don't even really care very much what their background is. I just care about their proposals, their policies. Are they good or are they bad? And for Professor Darity, apparently the proposals have to be directly addressing the wealth gap. That is the difference in wealth and income between Blacks and whites. That's important. Not saying it isn't. But you can eliminate the wealth gap and not eliminate poverty. You can eliminate the wealth gap and not get rid of and not end homelessness. You can eradicate the wealth gap and not have a well-educated citizenry that is safe in the streets. You just have to get enough Black billionaires to join the white ones, take a few of the white billionaires, get rid of them, replace them with Black billionaires, put some more white people on the streets as homeless. I mean, you can have the same level of inequality, but there can be more poor whites, and there are plenty of poor whites, but even more, and a few more African-American billionaires, and voila, the wealth gap is gone, and we still live in a horrible, evil society. So it seems to me the goal should be to guarantee that all have enough and none have too much. That's what I call for. And yes, policy is what counts. Let's continue with this video.
I remember that interview. It was conducted, I think, by a classmate of mine from college, Natasha Alford. And there's been an effort to sort of recontextualize that interview now that Kamala Harris is the chosen one, which is pretty mind-blowing.
So by default, it affects Black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
All right, let me see if I can get a little louder because it was sort of quiet there. But we'll see if we can just start that
but
again.
There's not a particular.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
So by default, it affects Black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit Black children, Black families, Black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this. Any policy that will benefit black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country.
So I think that's one of her best answers. I don't see any problem with what she said right there. I remember I got into an argument once with a Democratic liberal, I suppose, about Medicare for all. And he said, well, that's not going to solve the problem that black people have less than white people. I said, no, but it'll make it a lot better because many African Americans, more blacks, don't have health care than whites, and it's a significant burden for many black families, and this will alleviate that burden. And his response was, well, if you give white people something, then you're not closing the gap. You're not ending the gap. Okay, well, white Americans also deserve health care, also should have health care as a human right. It shouldn't be limited. That's something we should all have. So I thought her argument was extremely persuasive, what Kamala Harris said. Now, it doesn't go far enough. It addresses the question of should everyone have enough, but it certainly doesn't go to some have too much. But of course, if you jacked up the top marginal tax rates and the top capital gains tax rates, you would also greatly reduce the wealth gap because the richest Americans are disproportionately white. Yes, there are some African Americans who are billionaires, and they would have to pay higher taxes, significantly higher taxes. But they're a small percentage of the group that is billionaires. So yes, the Graves family, and the publishing family, and the Johnson family, they would have to pay higher taxes. The Obamas would have to pay higher taxes. Top African American entertainers and sports figures, Oprah, Michael Jordan, they would have to pay higher taxes. But the vast majority of those paying, the 90+% top marginal tax rate that I would call for on the billionaire class would be white. This would reduce wealth and income inequality, and it would be a colorblind solution. That's not good enough for Professor Darity. But Kamala Harris, though, has in fact called for explicit race-based solutions in the past. So this is back in 2019 when she was running for president the first time, and she has this housing plan, which is very similar to what she's touting now, the $25,000, and we'll get into whether it's good or bad in a little bit, $25,000 for first-time homebuyers. And she touted that as one that would make things better for black families. She spoke about this at Essence Fest in New Orleans back in 2019. And here's a little bit of a write-up of it. Let's see if I can get you the whole thing on screen for you. I'll make it a little bit bigger if we can. So, yeah, there we go. So she announced a comprehensive plan to address the racial wealth gap. So at least in 2019, when she ran for president, she was a little more explicit in her desire to reduce wealth and income inequality with explicit race-based solutions. And that included the $25,000 grant for first-time homebuyers. But in this case, it would be for those who lived in traditionally redlined communities. And those, of course, would be predominantly, if not completely or almost completely black at this point. But not completely, because some redline communities might be mixed race. And she saw Essence Fest as a way to reach black women especially. So she provided some solutions. And here, let's hear from her on this. And again, I am of the mind that when we demand economic justice for Americans, that should be for all Americans. If you're a homeless descendant, if you're a homeless white descendant of a slave owner, I believe you should get government assistance so you're not homeless anymore, so you have health care. so that your family is educated. And I believe if you're a billionaire black descendant of that same white slave owner, you should pay higher taxes. I recognize that we live in an unjust society, and part of the injustice that continues to today is a direct result of the slave society that for most of the American experience since Europeans colonized it has included slavery. But not every descendant of slaves is now a victim. And not every descendant of the slave owning class who's white is a victimizer. In this society today, you have a mix. And that is what our policies should recognize. Here's Kamala Harris with, I think, pretty good ideas.
We can shrink the wealth gap between black and white households by at least 1/3, but we cannot bridge the racial wealth gap just by addressing historical inequities. Although we must do that, we also have to write the next chapter. Black Americans were excluded in our country for years and generations from participating in the first industrial revolution and the wealth that generated. Now, with the technological revolution, we must ensure that everyone can participate in the wealth it creates. And to do that, I will invest in our HBCUs. I am a proud graduate of Howard University. I will invest in our HBCUs the resources they need to develop world-class STEM programming to ensure that our students have a real opportunity to shape the technological revolution.
All right, I'll stop there. Seems like a great idea. That's 2019. I haven't heard her talk about HBCUs. I haven't heard her talk about education much in this election cycle, except for reducing student debt, which is a good idea. I mean, what we really need to do is make college truly affordable for every American, and go back to a system where going to a state university might cost you $100 or a couple $100 a semester. That's where we need to be. We need to be there, and we need to be in a country where families were able to earn enough money from a job, from a couple, if one parent worked or both parents were able to earn enough money to have a home that they owned or a nice apartment that they rented, and afford to send their kids to one of those inexpensive state schools where you would get an incredible education, like the University of Michigan, like Cal, like you name your top schools, and where they're not segregated. But HBCUs are a great option for many African American families. They provide really good education and they're less expensive. But she's right. The funding for those schools isn't what it should be. And so I think this was a really good idea, and it is targeted, right? Because HBCUs basically serve black students, not exclusively by any means, but generally. So this is a good idea. Now, she's kind of backed away from that. Remember, she said, I'm going to provide help. It's not going to be explicitly race-based. But these are what I believe really good ways to go. And if she were touting HBCU funding right now, I would be, I'm not going to support her. I made it very, very clear. Her policy with respect to Israel makes her a non-starter for me. End of it. And there are many other issues that I don't like. But I want to get to where, a place where we can say, okay, these are good policies, or these are decent policies. These are policies that will make life better. Do I think she would promote them and push them if she were made president? Probably not. I don't think there's really any real commitment to improving the quality of life, the plight of poor, struggling, working class, middle class Americans. I haven't seen that in her record. But I still think these are policies that we should be discussing. Just because I don't think she's the best advocate for them, someone I don't particularly trust, that doesn't mean they're not important. She has made a centerpiece the $25,000 subsidy for first-time homeowners. This is not something that the economist William Darity supports. I get that. I don't think it's the best idea either. I don't think it's as bad as he does. I get the reasons for it, but in the end, it is inadequate. Let's hear from Darity, because this is where I think he's spot on. His criticism of the policy in specific that Kamala Harris is proposing.
There's a number of problems there. The first is the overstatement of the significance of home ownership as a component of individuals' portfolios. If you start talking about folks who are at the upper end of the wealth distribution, and I'm not talking about a handful of people, the upper quarter of the wealth distribution, home equity is not as significant for them as other kinds of assets. Like,
I'm going to stop it there. I think he's a little bit wrong there, not completely, but his point is that, hey, the top 25% of Americans don't include their home as the most important or as a critically important aspect of their net worth. That owning a home isn't necessarily the biggest portion of their wealth. So even if you can increase the number of poor families or middle-class families, African-American families, black families that have a home, that own a house or an apartment, condo, that won't necessarily reduce the wealth gap. I think he's a little bit off there. I think families that are in the top 25%, which I would assume somewhere in the $500,000 to $1 million range, maybe a little more than that. But even if it's up to 1.5 or 2 million, like if you're in the top 25%, I don't think people who are in the top 25, I haven't crunched the numbers. I think the 1% own 5 million. So if the 1% own 5 million, maybe the top 25% own 750,000, control that much wealth. That house is going to be a big chunk of anything under anybody who's got less than $3 or $4 million total. Their house is going to be a big chunk of that, their net worth. There's no question about it. So the house is an important, very, very important, probably the number one biggest holding for most families, even up into the top 25%. So I think he gets this wrong. He's an economist. I may be wrong, but I don't think I am.
Financial assets, home, non-residential properties, business ownership, their retirement accounts, and the like. All of those things are at least as significant, if not more so, than home ownership in terms of their portfolios. And so I think there's a romanticization of home ownership in this country. Stems from the building of the middle class discriminatorily, the middle point of the 20th century through the GI Bill. But if we're talking about closing the wealth gap, we're not talking about a focus exclusively on the middle class among whites. We have to take into account the wealthiest whites as well for really addressing the magnitude of the gap.
So what he's saying is, that this plan, this idea of increasing the number of black families that own homes by providing first-time homeowners with a first-time home buyers with a subsidy isn't nearly good enough. You're not even taking into account all those billionaires. Now, I don't think Kamala, to be fair to her, she didn't say she's going to close the wealth gap. She didn't say that's her goal. And I'm sort of curious why that's Darity's goal, is to close. In other words, to make sure that there's no difference in income and wealth between the average black family and every other family. I understand that's aspirational, but should that be the policy? Or shouldn't the policy be, again, that everyone has enough and no one has too much? Because if you closing the wealth gap doesn't mean everyone has enough and no one has too much. Closing the wealth gap doesn't mean everyone has health care. What closing the wealth gap means is that if 20% of white people don't have health care, then only 20% of black people don't have health care. I don't I don't understand that goal. Shouldn't the goal be that everyone has health care? Shouldn't the goal be that everyone, not that 30% of everyone, of all whites, of all African Americans, all Asians, 30% all have a home? Shouldn't it be that everyone has a place to sleep and is safe and secure at night? That should be the goal. That's the goal I pursue. And at the same time, we don't have billionaires, period.
That home ownership is not the whole story. Second problem is a $25,000 mortgage supplement's not going to take you very far if you're in a country in which the median home price is somewhere in the vicinity of $500,000 to $550,000.
So this is 100% correct. There's no doubt about this. It's just not enough. I mean, it's just not a big enough subsidy. And you do run into that question, well, what would be a big enough subsidy? How much do we have to provide families? That's why I have an issue with this whole way of looking at the problem. Okay, we're going to kind of peel around. We're going to go around the edges. We're going to provide this subsidy to these people. We're going to have Obamacare so you can buy health care on an exchange somewhere. No, you're looking at it the wrong way. The right way is a safe, secure place to sleep. A safe home for your family is a human right, and everyone gets that. Period. End of story. So then we say, how do we get there? And no one's going to say, well, the way we get there is with a $25,000 subsidy. The way we get there is we build government housing. We greatly reduce wealth and income inequality so that builders are incentivized to build more middle-class homes because there's more middle-class people and there's fewer billionaires. There's no billionaires. Right now, you build a house for $20 million, you make $10 million profit. There are people who will buy that $20 million house. But if there weren't billionaires, if there weren't even centimillionaires or just a few centimillionaires, you're not going to be able to sell many $20 million houses. What you will be able to sell if we have good working class and middle class jobs, because we bring jobs back here with tariffs and we have a strong pro-worker, pro-labor union movement, then you'll be able to make a lot of money building houses that are $250,000, $300,000, $500,000. And there will be more houses built that meet that in that price point. So if your goal, or you recognize your goal, is to guarantee all enough, including a safe, secure place to live, you build government housing. You build, somewhat rudimentary, but nice enough, safe. And you also incentivize through a strong, vibrant, secure middle class, people building houses that serve that demographic. That's the way you do it. If your goal is everyone has health care, you don't say, well, let's come up with this idea where people can buy insurance on an exchange and then the employer has to provide it for them if they work 30 hours, but not if they work 25. No. If your goal is that everyone get health care when they're sick, when they're hurt, when they're injured, then you just say, okay, we're going to pay for health care. The government will pay for health care. And guess what? It works. That's the problem with these sort of more esoterica, these targeted ideas like, well, let's have homes for these people, but not for those people. No, I'm not there. No one, by virtue of family history, is either more or less entitled to what should be human rights. Shelter, security, economic security, retirement. That seems so obvious to me. All right, here's the final solution that Professor Darity provides. By the way, a solution that to a problem that Kamala Harris never brings up. She doesn't say we're going to close the wealth gap or that's my goal. I do think it's interesting that's his goal. And we'll get into that in just a moment.
I think you know that my answer is going to be that if we're going to actually have a comprehensive assault on the racial wealth gap, it's going to require a program that is on the order of a comprehensive national reparations plan. That there's no indirect policy that I'm aware of, like giving people housing subsidies, that's going to close the racial wealth gap.
All right, so let me stop it there. He uses that expression close, right? Meaning there's no difference between the wealth of black and white families. He doesn't say narrow, he doesn't say reduce, because obviously lots of really important, good, strong policies that would make life better for all of us would reduce the racial wealth gap. In fact, every policy that I can think of that we need to impose to make life tolerable for hundreds of millions of Americans and around the world would greatly reduce the racial wealth gap. Those would include Medicare for all, some type of government housing program, jobs programs, affordable education for all with no debt, debt-free education for all. All of those would greatly reduce wealth and income inequality across the board, not just between blacks and whites, but between poor and wealthy people. But Darity is not, apparently, maybe he's interested, and I'm not saying he isn't, but his focus is no differences between blacks and whites, period. And I think it's because, I gotta say, because he's privileged. He's an elite. He's at the top of the tree. He's touted 10th, same as Brianna Joy. They do have health care. I don't know, maybe she doesn't because she's a podcaster. I assume she does. He does. He's a Duke professor. You can't get much better than that. His plan would lead to him getting money. He would get reparations.
It's very difficult to conceive of or construct what we might refer to as a universal policy where we give something to everybody that would actually close the racial wealth gap. There are some possibilities there, but nothing that I've seen anybody propose fits that mold.
Well, it's just not true when he says that, because Medicare for all has been proposed for a long, long time, and it would significantly reduce the gap. Much higher taxes on, when we had much higher taxes on rich people in the 50s, when we had the GI Bill, that did greatly reduce the wealth gap between blacks and whites. And it's grown since then. So, in fact, what he's saying isn't even true.
So my sense is that if you want to really close the racial wealth gap, you do it by making direct payments to Black Americans who are eligible. And from my perspective, the eligible population should be Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States. So that's how you do it, just straightforward.
All right, so, I mean, it would benefit him, right? I mean, he's saying, even though I'm a Duke law professor, even though I've got all sorts of benefits, my life is better than most Americans' lives, black and white, it doesn't matter. I still should get reparations. Well, I guess we can debate that. I just don't get that. I don't see that. If you specifically, Walter Darity, can point to specific ways that you were harmed by others, yes, you should get compensated for that. That's the tort system. But you're doing really well. Your life is better than most people's lives. I always find it really upsetting when people present themselves as victims who are deserving of some sort of compensation because of their identity. I find the whole notion that Jews, because of the Holocaust, get to treat other people like crap. It's awful. It's wrong. Or even that we're entitled to a special dispensation of some sort. If you're a poor Jewish person, if you're homeless, if you have nothing, yes, you should get enough. But we aren't going to overlook other poor people, other struggling people, other people whose lives are lousy. We shouldn't, to give you something that you don't need, that is beyond what would put you even further ahead of most Americans. I see people as individuals. Yes, members of groups are often victimized or victimizers. But in the end, it's the victim who should be rewarded, or compensated is a better word. Just because you're a Palestinian doesn't make you a victim. What makes you a victim is that you're getting bombed, your house is blown up, you lost your parents, you saw your child died in your arms. That's what makes you a victim. And that's what we need to address. One candidate is calling for, and again, we don't totally agree. Harris is more of a believer in identity politics. She does call for, I think she is even calling for reparations in her, she is calling for reparations, which I don't support as it's defined. But I still, you can't have everything. And I don't want a border wall. I don't want fracking. I don't want unconditional support for Israeli genocide. I will never support anyone who is for that. I certainly don't want endless war with Russia or war with Iran. I'm not going to vote for a fascist or a proto-fascist. I want Medicare for all. So I don't agree with her on everything, but I'm a hell of a lot closer to her on most issues than to her opponents. So I vote for Jill Stein. I hope you will too.
People are tired of being thrown under the bus by wealthy elites and their bought politicians. Tired of living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay the rent, locked in student debt and medical debt, child poverty doubling, rising diseases of despair, growing hopelessness. The political system is broken. The two Wall Street parties are bought and paid for. Over 60% of us now say the bipartisan establishments failed us, and we need a party that serves the people. I'm Jill Stein, and I'm running for president to offer that choice for the people outside of the failed two-party system. We'll put solutions to the crises we face, crushing inequality, endless war, and climate collapse. And we'll put these front and center in this election and on the ballot across the country. The ruling parties that got us into this mess aren't getting us out. Both parties are squandering trillions on the endless war machine, fueling conflict around the world, while tens of millions here at home lack food, housing, healthcare. Democrats have betrayed their promises for working people, youth, and the climate again and again, while Republicans don't even make such promises in the first place. And both parties are a danger to our democracy, expanding censorship, criminalizing protest, throwing competitors off the ballot, suppressing debates,
American people who have been systematically locked out of these debates,
rigging their primaries. So forget the pundits and the attack dogs who tell you to ignore your misery and just keep voting for those who caused it in the first place. Change won't come from the ruling elites. It comes from we, the people. And when we stand together, we can create living wage jobs for all Americans. We can guarantee an economic bill of rights with the right to a job, to health care, to housing, to food, education, and more. We can abolish student debt, medical debt. We can create a Green New Deal with millions of jobs to fight climate collapse and protect Mother Earth. And we can ensure our constitutional rights and freedoms and justice for all. We can end the endless wars and rampant militarism and use diplomacy and international law instead to end violence, occupation, and apartheid. We do have the power, and we can use it in this election to start building an America and a world that works for all of us. Go to JillStein2024.com and join us.
It just seems so obvious that she's the right choice. I just don't even get how people can see it any other way. You know, Arlen said something yesterday that was very interesting. He said, you know, how your views are different than other people's. You know, you have this sort of both parties stink approach, and you're for the Green Party. And he's like, there's no one who seems to have that view. I don't agree with him at all. I like to be with the view. Arlen has that view. Arlen doesn't like the Democrats very much, but he has elevated his disdain. And I don't mean this to dismiss. I really shouldn't. He's not on the call, so it's not really fair to him. But I see this in so many of you who insist you have to vote for Harris. It's not like you particularly like Kamala Harris. You don't say, oh, their policies are good. It's just we have to defeat Trump. And you see when you do that, you're letting the corporate elites, the billionaire class, win, just as they win when the Trump voter says, yeah, you know, there's things I don't like about the Donald. I don't like the fact that he has those divorces, and I don't like the things he says about women, and I think those are problematic, but I could never vote for Harris. I could never vote for Biden. So you're all playing the same game. And you're losing. We have to go in a different direction altogether. Please consider voting for Jill Stein. Please consider voting against the military-industrial complex and the corporate elites and the billionaire class. Please. I'll be back tomorrow. Seem to hear, oh, I'm getting a caller now, which is kind of interesting.